I remember during the release of the second season of Amphibia, there were all these wild theories about how Marcy was secretly this vile manipulator who was going to end up backstabbing Anne. And then there were all these counter theories woven by Marcy fans who were so outraged by these ideas that she would betray Anne that they leapt right to her defense. If the former group of people were unnecessarily harsh to Marcy, the latter group were unnecessarily lenient, arguing more or less that Marcy was a perfect little angel who was exactly what she appeared to be on the surface and could not possibly do anything wrong. In retrospect, both of these perspectives seem not only wrong, though they are wrong, but very naive and almost patronizing. Marcy isn't a perfect little cute object of perfection, but neither is she this manipulative, cold-hearted villain. She's just a person. She's a desperate young woman who acts impulsively because she has found herself in a situation she cannot bear. She chooses to leave a lonely, somber life to live in a majestic fantasy world with her two best friends, then keep those best friends from returning home so they can keep traveling to different worlds with her. This way, she could constantly be having wonderful and thrilling adventures with her best friends. However, Marcy, in escaping trauma, in turn traumatizes her best friends, causing them a lot of stress and anxiety that they otherwise would not have gone through had Marcy not made the choices that she did. By true colors, she realizes just how alone she has become. Her two closest friends, the people she cares the most about in the world, they back away from her slowly, leaving her in the dark, alone. And her surrogate father, King Andreas, is much worse to her. First, he betrays her, then he literally stabs her in the back. Everyone she invested her trust in was not there for her by the end. Now, this is not to say Anne and Sasha are the same as the vile King Andreas, only that when the truth was revealed, Marcy ended up being alone again. Her actions aren't vile, but she's not blameless either. Rather, the entire Marcy situation is just desperately sad. Her entire story is sad in retrospect, and the show just doesn't directly call attention to this while you're watching Season 2 for the first time, because the show draws you into how Marcy presents herself as this goofy nerd with a can-do attitude. Which is not wrong, exactly. It's not some mask obscuring her true feelings, but it is a very reductionist view of her character. As she says, she just doesn't want to be alone. And there's nothing she's not willing to do to make sure that she's not alone, and then she ends up alone anyway. In a previous video, The Tragedy of Marcy Wu, I compared Marcy's story to Shakespearean tragedy, and I would like to expand on that a little. There are three major attributes that I tend to associate with Shakespearean tragedy. Number one, nobility of spirit. This does not necessarily mean that the tragic hero needs to be a literal noble, nor does it necessarily mean that they need to be rich or successful. It just means that we view the tragic hero at the start of their tale as someone worth respecting. They have qualities that we find aspirational, or at least worthy of our attention. Number two, the tragic flaw. There must be a flaw in the character that they do not address, and this flaw must lead directly to their downfall. This is pretty straightforward. And number three, this one I was thinking about a lot in the last couple days. Irony and futility. The tragic hero tries desperately to prevent an outcome from occurring, and yet it is their actions that directly cause that tragic outcome to occur. Marcy fits all three of these characteristics. I would argue that all three of these young women have a nobility of spirit. Though they come into this world as outsiders, they quickly all establish themselves as leaders in their respective worlds, not because of any prophecy, though the prophecy might come into play later, but because of their own intelligence, compassion, and determination. As for a tragic flaw, Marcy does have one, but it's not the one that a lot of people think of. They say that Marcy is just obsessed with escapism, that she's basically Mabel from the end of Gravity Falls, but this is not really true. There's nothing wrong with her wanting to live in Amphibia instead of on Earth. That is a perfectly reasonable choice she makes considering her desperation back on Earth. No, her tragic flaw is that she is so conflict-averse that she does not reveal the truth to her friends. She's desperate to please her friends, so she does not reveal information that she knows would upset them, which in turn, ironically, leads to her hurting them worse than she otherwise would have. But it is the third and final characteristic of Shakespearean tragedy that I find the most relevant. Marcy finds the Calamity Box and comes up with the plan for them to take it because she does not want to be alone. She wants to be with her friends. As an introverted nerd, Marcy is not the best at making connections with other people. It is her friendships with Anne and Sasha that make life on Earth really bearable for Marcy. And even then, she is quiet and she's resigned. She constantly defers to her friends. And she always occupies herself with video games or other fantastical adventures. Amphibia changes that. Here, Marcy is treated with respect. Here, other people care what she has to say. They value her as a person. This world gives her that, and then it cruelly takes that away from her. Marcy's actions are directly what caused her downfall, although, like in Shakespearean tragedy, what happens to her is, of course, directly out of proportion with whatever failings she might have. The question, I believe, we really ought to ask ourselves is what made Marcy's home life so abysmal to her that she prefers to go away to another world to get away from that life and to try and start over. I'm not saying that Marcy's parents are necessarily abusive. They might be, but we do not know enough about them at this point to make that judgment, and I do not believe we should harshly judge characters we don't know a lot about. Nonetheless, Marcy's willingness to leave her parents when they want her to leave her friends and her life here demonstrates that she is not close with them at all. You could say this is just a mere impulse. Everyone gets tired of their parents sometime, especially when they're that age. But Marcy's situation is more serious than that. She has months and months to think about what she did. She has months and months to contemplate the consequences of her actions, and while she probably feels a little guilty, she has absolutely no desire, we see, to return to her parents. She doesn't mention them once. She wants to stay with her friends and travel together with them to different worlds. While we don't know much about her parents, we do know that Marcy does not seem to have been particularly close with them, or they with her. Now, you could say this is the same for Sasha, and it is, and I do hope we get more information about Sasha's home life in Season 3. And it is true that Sasha seems to have a very tense relationship with her parents, considering that she uses the word parents to Anne with the intensity of a slur. But Sasha is a different case. She's not like Marcy. Sasha is ultimately alright. She's controlling and manipulative, but she does not seem like a really desperate and miserable person. She does not seem like she's haunted by forces out of her control. Yes, her entire conception of her friendship with Anne was broken at the end of Season 1, but she's worked hard to fix that. She is probably the kind of person who would hate to be seen as a victim. Sure, life hasn't been perfect for her, but she's not miserable. She's not constantly upset with the direction her life has taken, and there's no indication that this is a change from how she was back on Earth. Marcy, however, seems legitimately haunted by the idea of returning home. Sasha doesn't care if she goes home. Marcy actively does not want to go home. That's the difference. These two responses are, of course, contrasted against Anne's response to being in this world, which is to want to go home. Anne's family is imperfect, but they're imperfect in a normal way. While her mother, I'd argue, is too hard on her, we have no indication that she has any real resentment toward her parents. We know very little about Sasha's family, but based on how precocious and overprotective she is, and based on how she refers to parents when talking to Anne, I assume that her parents probably were not around often, and she had to do a lot by herself. She really had to do a lot of the work of raising herself. I'd argue her parents probably have these really demanding, high-paying jobs, so they're not there often. Marcy's situation is the complete opposite of Sasha's. Marcy's parents would probably say that they care about her, but their influence is suffocating Marcy to the extent that she, after being in this fantasy world for about half a year, has no desire to return home. Her home life was not alright, and her decision to take the box was not this instant impulse. It was an impulse that overtook her based on resentment and a feeling of helplessness that had been building up for a long time. We may not know exactly what trauma she has endured, but her actions do speak to her having endured a lot of trauma, and her desire to escape from that trauma inadvertently caused trauma to the two people she cares the most about in the world. That's a sad, somber, kind of depressing story, and I hope it gets better for Marcy in Season 3. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Amphibia. Season 2B was an incredible and positive surprise. It really demonstrated how the show could deliver on the potential it depicted in Reunion and take that next step and become a truly compelling work of television. I was blown away by Season 2B, and I cannot wait to see how they expand on it in Season 3. I really do hope we get more focus on Anne, Marcy, and Sasha, all three of them. Especially Marcy. I want to know more about her and her relationship with her parents and her home life in general. I think there's still a lot there that can be explored. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon, I promise you all that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.